God, like, we didn't, like, this was the most amazing thing, right? So check this out. This story really starts with me and my daughter Samaya. She's my youngest of 3 children, and she sends me on this journey. And it all began in my truck one afternoon after school. She was just started first grade, so she's about 7 years old. And she's sitting there on her iPad. And I had got a letter in the mail that said she was qualified to apply for the Center for Academically Talented Students. And they sent us the interview questions ahead of time so we could study them. So I told her, I'm just going to ask you one question a day. Here's question number 1. If you could have somebody come to your classroom and teach you something, someone from the past or the present, who would it be and why? And my little 7-year-old daughter looks up from her iPad and says to me, I wish Steve could come to our class and teach us how to make the world a better place with technology. And I looked at her like so confused because how do you know who Steve is? Steve who? And she says, Steve Jobs. And I'm like, how do you know who Steve Jobs is? And she says, well, Miss Christina, who is her hearing impaired teacher that comes from the Arizona School for the Deaf and Blind to make sure she's doing okay. Miss Christina told me that he made the iPad. And I'm like, okay. But as shocked as I was by her answer, I was also very jealous as her dad. I want her to say, you, Dad. And so my instinct was to research this guy, Steve Jobs, who I knew very little about. I watched an hour-long documentary, and in that hour, what stood out to me was that he read 2 books that completely changed his life. And the 2 books were Be Here Now by Ram Dass and Cosmic Consciousness by Richard Buke. And I was not a reader, didn't own books, but I got the books. I went to Barnes & Noble and I bought Be Here Now. They had it on the shelf. And I ordered Cosmic Consciousness online. I had to wait like a few days for it. So I naturally read Be Here Now first. And I hadn't read in 10 years. But this book had me glued. And I was like 7 days and I read this thick book, which some people could have probably read it in a day, but it took me 7 days. What I had taken from this whole book was the very end message, and it said, no matter what religion you are, be it Christian, Buddhist, atheist, or if you just drop acid tablets and take mushrooms, what you should learn is meditation and practice it regularly. And I thought to myself in that moment, where in the heck am I going to learn meditation? And who's going to teach me that? And just then I look up and right in front of me is my to-do list. My big calendar. It's like 5 feet wide by 4 feet tall on the wall in front of me. And I can clearly see that in 2 weeks' time I have my annual veterans doctor appointment. I get to go to the VA once a year and get checked up. And I'm like, well, my doctor, Dr. Bianco, just happened to be a holistic healing doctor. He was into that stuff. He doesn't work there anymore. They removed him because of the conflict of interest in this program. While the program existed, he called it Mind, Body, and Soul Healing. So during my annual visit, I said, hey, Doc, I need you to teach me that meditation. He's like doing my blood pressure. He was real quick. He didn't really give anybody the time of day. I actually disliked the man very much and tried to have him change as my doctor literally 3 times. I didn't like the guy.
Yeah.
But I was like, hey, I need to learn that meditation. Can you teach it to me? And he snaps to his nurse and says, nurse, set me up at 1 hour with Mrs. Martinez next week. And it's hard to get in the VA. So this was like, the timing was unreal. So I was like, cool. The very next week I'm sitting in Dr. P's office and he teaches me transcendental meditation. And he goes through this technique of sitting there on the floor with my feet touching, back straight. I'm to put one hand on my gut, and he has me visualize a paradise with my eyes closed. So I go to a place that I used to go when I was a child, up in the White Mountains by the stream with the tall grass and birds and wind and the pine cones, and that's where I went in my mind. And then he instructed me to come up with what I understand now is like a mantra, or just be it I am at peace, or in the movie Star Wars the guy says I am one with the Force, the Force is with me.
Yeah.
So I was to say I am at one with peace, peace is with me, in the process of a 4 count, making sure that I'm breathing deep into my gut. So not the shallow breath we usually take, but to hold it there, I silently say this mantra, breathing through my nose at all times, and go through this process. And he guided me through this meditation for about 15 minutes and had me clear my mind, and he would help me come back because I would think about other things naturally, and he'd say, acknowledge you're thinking about other things, but then come back to your mantra. And after about 15 minutes, I couldn't feel the chair anymore, I couldn't feel my body anymore, and I saw these green orbs and purple waves. It was like a psychedelic trip. And I didn't have time anymore to think about or my body. It was the strangest thing I'd ever experienced in my life. He comes back into the room, and I could hear him come back in the room. I heard the door. And he tells me to start wiggling my toes and start basically coming back to earth. And in my mind, as I said, I was related. The only thing I could relate this to was a psychedelic trip. And the first thing he says before I can say anything is, Chris, I didn't give you any pills or any drugs. You can do this on your own at home anytime you want. And I was mind blown, totally shocked by this experience. And so I wanted to implement it into my daily life. It was so amazing. So I started doing this every day after my run. And I was at this point in my life running every day for about 30 minutes to 45 minutes at like a 9-minute mile pace, not super fast but not super slow. And I was eating whole foods, raw, organic, and drinking purified water because I was trying to cure myself from what the VA had diagnosed me with as lymphoma. And I was really in a battle for my life at this time, and I was on this holistic healing. So I added meditation to my routine. Naturally, when I was done with my run, I would stretch. Seems now like I was doing yoga, and I'd add this breathing to it. And I'd be in the sun for 45 minutes, and I did this. In a matter of 2 weeks, DJ, I started to get this, I started waking up with this riddle in my head, like an earworm. Like you get a song in your head and you can't get it out, and I'm saying this riddle and over and over and over and over in my head, and I thought, well, I must have had a weird dream. You know, it'll go away tomorrow. And then the next day it was still there, and I thought, where did I make this up from? And then the third day come and it's still in my head, and I was like, I gotta tell somebody. So I told a buddy of mine, Mario, and he had nothing to say. Told my girlfriend, she had nothing really to say, and my mom told me to pray about it. So I realized this message, this riddle was for me to solve, and nobody else was gonna ever understand this or help. So I took a real literal approach to it, So here's the riddle. Be still. Choose a place at the head of the city. I will reveal myself to you in the place of your nativity. There you will find a crystal sword. So, telling this to anybody made me sound crazy, right? It looked like a nut case. So I didn't really tell anybody else and was reluctant to tell those 3 people. So literally, I took it as if I had to choose a place at the head of my city. I live in Tucson. And if I imagine Tucson as being some kind of body, like a stick figure have you, then the head of the city is going to be at the north side of town. And I know that when I come in from Phoenix or California, you come into Tucson, the first thing you come to before you get to Tucson is the Tucson Mountains, and it's Sombrero Peak. Sombrero Peak, it looks like a big sombrero, which if you don't know, it's a Mexican hat, right? Yeah. And I had taken this beautiful picture of the peak one day when I was jogging, just because of how beautiful it looks. And you can kind of see how it looks like a sombrero, right? Mm-hmm. So in my brain, I was like, it's gotta be Sombrero Peak. So I'm like, I gotta go to the library and check this out. And I hadn't been to the library in ages. I didn't have a library card. It was right up the street, like 10 o'clock in the day. And I thought I was going to find the Dewey Decimal System in the card catalog, but they had computers, right? So I was able to look it up on the computer.
It's old school.
And it said that the book was like on the shelf right behind me, man. And so I went to the shelf, grabbed the book off the bottom shelf, a little green book, and I opened it up. And it said that early settlers named it Safford Peak. And it's just called Sombrero Peak because that's its nickname, because it looks like one. Well, why this is so crazy is because I was born in Safford. So the place of your nativity line was like, okay, it's Safford Peak. And why in the world is there a mountain peak in Tucson called Safford Peak when Safford is 150 miles to the east? It's just weird. So I looked it up on my phone right then and there. Safford Peak. And it brings me to this article. And the title of the article was A Still Place in a Turning World. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, man! The first line was be still. So I'm like, this is the craziest thing at this point that's ever happened to me. So I go home. It's like 5 minutes down the road from the public library. I go home. I'm in my kitchen. And there's a number on the bottom of that article to a place. And so I call the number. And some lady answers. Her name is Amy. And she says, hello? And I'm like, hey, this is Chris. I read about your place in an article and wanted to know more about it. And she's like, oh, where are you from? And I say Tucson. And she's like, and what article did you read? And I told her, and she said, well, I only sent that article to out-of-state sites trying to attract out-of-state visitors because we don't want a lot of attention here. We're a small place trying to keep peace and tranquility. The mission of this place is to keep a still place in a turning world. And that's the mission statement of the founder. The founder was a guy named Elmer Staggs, a World War II veteran. And he founded this place back in the mid-50s. And so I said, well, it's kind of strange how I came to the article. And I went ahead and told her my story, as strange as it is. And she said, well, I happen to have a cottage here on site that you can continue your journey at. Would you like to rent it? And I'm like, well, sure, And she says, well, I usually rent it like on the weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, like 3 days, because we're a nonprofit organization and I do this for free and have a regular job during the week. And at this time, money was tight, and I said, ma'am, money is tight. Is there any way possible you can accommodate just one day? And I'm thinking the weekend, And so she says, I'll have to check my schedule and get back to you. And so I waited 3 days, and she calls me back, and she says, Chris, how about October 12th. It's a Wednesday. Well, my birthday is October 12th. So I'm like, book it, man. Sign me up, right? So I'm like anxiously waiting for this day to come, right? Anxiously waiting. And so the night before, it's like 10 at night. And I'm like, I'm going to hike that peak, man. So I call my high school buddy, Albert. And I'm like, dude, you want to hike the hill with me tomorrow? I'm going to go on a hike for my birthday. He's like, sure, man. What time? And I said, show up at like 5. And we'll take off. So he shows up at 5 in the morning on my birthday, 2016, October 12th. He shows up at like 5, and he's got one little bottle of water, man, like a 16-ounce bottle. And he's wearing tennis shoes, shorts, and a tank top. And I got full combat gear, combat boots, desert camis, you know, brimmed hat. And I got four of these bad boys, actually. Just for me, but I'm like, you know what, I'll share it with Albert. It's cool.
He's never gone hiking.
He's never gone hiking. So we take off, man. We're there by 5:30, parked and ready to step off. We take off and hit the hill. And immediately he realizes we're not on any trail. And he's like, where are we going, Chris? And I said, you see that hill? Probably up there, dude. And he's like, okay. Probably didn't, you know, just whatever, man. So we start hiking. Now it's 6:30 and the sun is rising, so we sit on the ridge and we kick back and we watch the sun come up. And then we go down the ridge to the other side. And 3 more hours. So now we're like 4 hours into this hike and we're sitting down high in the ridge. And we sit there and he's all exhausted or whatever. And he asks me, where the hell are we going, Chris? And in this moment, dude, I didn't really know yet. I was just walking on instinct. We're just having fun, basically. I'm hanging out with my high school buddy. I'm having a good time. I don't know. I have no plan. I don't know what to expect, dude. But in that moment that he asked me, we're sitting there facing north with the ridge to our back and the sun's behind the ridge. And I look to the east, my right. And you know in the Marine Corps they teach you how to know yardage by football fields. So I know this was about 450 yards away, this rock formation that my eyes landed upon. And you can take a look at this and see if you can see it. I have posted this to my social media page. What I saw, and the pictures go from smaller to bigger, 4 different looks at it. The smallest image is where I saw it from and what I saw. What I saw was an angel carved into the stone with its wings at its back and its arm put outright and its finger pointing in the direction I should go. And at the base I saw other angels at its base. And I looked in the direction this finger was pointing, and I saw a break in the ridge. And at this very moment, the sun was passing through that break in the ridge. And I said to Albert, we're going that way. And we like kind of attacked the hill and started heading that way. And on the way up there, we found this huge mountain lion cave with all this mountain lion crap everywhere. Like clearly the mountain lion was living there. We saw its tracks. This is me and my buddy. We went up in the cave and took a bunch of pictures and hanging out for a little bit, and then we realized that mountain lion was probably looking at us.
Watching it.
And so we went back to that break in the mountain and we attacked to the other side. And we made it through, and by this time, like, the sun was beating down and it was probably 90 degrees out. And would you believe it, we were out of water, man. And we should have brought more or conserved or something. But at this point we were a little stressed out because this was like the point of no return. Because if we go back this way, it's just as hard because we gotta go down. We just scathed up.
Yeah.
If we go that way, we went the way we didn't know. even though we couldn't see the truck, we didn't know where the heck we were. But like we had started, I was going on faith, man. Like, so we just started down this hill trying to get back to the truck. And there's one big Palo Verde tree. Not very many out there, but one big one. And we were like, let's go catch some shade down there. And we headed towards it, and we must have startled like these 3 big bucks. That was cool, seeing big antlers run in the desert. And I was like, well, there's life out here. We can make it. So we go down to that tree, man, and as I'm approaching the tree, the sun like catches something shiny, and it's reflecting right to my eye, and I go towards it, and half buried under this stone is this quartz crystal arrowhead. And I'm like dust it off, and I put it in my hand, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And I'm like, I'm in shock and I'm speechless, holding it in my hand. And Albert jumps over my shoulder and he's like, get your crystal sword, your crystal sword. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, this was the most amazing thing, right? So, as unbelievable as all this was, it all came to be. And so I was trying to like think to myself, what did this mean for me? Like, is that it? Like, it's over? Like, journey done? What I did take from it at that point was that I should listen to my intuition. And that I shouldn't doubt it, regardless of how strange it may seem. And I continued to meditate at that location day after day after day, searching for more answers. And it was November now, 2016, and the season to do heat inspections.